Thank you so much. And first of all, I'm just going to start by saying I am so super excited to be here. My name is Nitya Narasimhan. Thanks for the great introduction. My talk is called Chalk the Talk because it really was, I figured that everyone's going to be telling you lots of tips and tricks for how you can do sketchnoting, visual note-taking, all of that. But I wanted to give you a sense of my own journey and one aspect that made sketchnoting useful for me. And that was how it could help make me a better speaker. Also, two huge shout outs right now. One, that speaker card is awesome. The organizers of this event have been brilliant, so I had to use it. Second thing, if you have any feedback for me, this is the first time I'm actually trying to do this version of the talk. Just hashtag chalk the talk or tag me at Nitya, and I'd love to get your feedback. So a little bit about me. I've actually been in industry for over 2 decades now. And if I kind of look over my journey, it's kind of bookended by the two things, right? First, there are the three things that matter a lot to me. So I have a PhD in computer engineering. I've had a whole background in research and technology. And it's been a lot for me to kind of figure out how to convey information to people. But I'm also a parent. And as a parent now, I have an 11-year-old, and it's been a whole journey in trying to figure out how to explain things to someone who is 11 and is extremely curious. I'm also a polyglot in the sense that over 2 decades, I've had to wear different hats, work in different areas, do different things. And that meant that I had to really work with different audiences. And it all came together in my current role because I develop relations in Microsoft. That's literally my job. I'm the regional lead for North America across startup, student, and professional developer audiences. And they come at all levels, right? So if I look back at my career, I'm like, what exactly unites it? It turns out it's a very simple thing. Everywhere I go, I'm trying to communicate complex ideas to diverse people in a way that they can relate to, whoever they are. And that is where I think sketchnoting really shines. But that's not how my origin story started. So I just want to give you a little bit of a sidebar here. My origin story for sketchnoting was I started this as a self-care thing. I was going through a period of burnout. And when I started kind of taking time to just slow myself down. I'd go out with a little doodle pad and I'd be drawing things. And I found two remarkable things. First, when I started drawing, not only did I slow myself down and start paying attention to what's around me, I saw details I would miss otherwise. And it really helped me in kind of focusing my attention and not getting stressed out by what was going on around me, which is super useful in meetings, by the way. The second thing that made it really, really useful is recall. To this day, I remember where I drew this. This was at an event where I was just sitting there and there was a bunch of decorative flowers on a table and I was sketching it, right? And that is the most powerful tool for visual storytelling, is the ability for people to then use it as a very valuable memory. So here's the fact. I don't know if you know this, but 60% of the population today are visual learners. 60%. That means that whether you're writing a blog post or doing a talk, if you don't kind of incorporate visual elements in your talk, you might not be delivering it in the most efficient way for 60% of the population. So what exactly am I talking about when I talk about sketchnoting? I wanted you to think about it in two different perspectives. First, it's visual note-taking. And visual note-taking is really when someone else is delivering something, and it could be you, it could be your own dry run. And what you're really trying to do is distill down what you hear in a way that you're kind of capturing the big points and that you can come back and listen to later. But visual storytelling is the reverse. Visual storytelling is where you are trying to convey an idea to the audience. And what you really need to be doing is kind of shifting how you deliver it to match their expectations. So they're two sides of the same coin. So what is visual storytelling? If you take nothing away from this, I want you to think about visual storytelling as a very powerful tool for 3 reasons. And I'm going to say this again and again throughout the talk, I'm sure, but they matter. 1, visual stories are the most inclusive way to share knowledge, because when you draw things, you're not using language. You're not using cultural things that only some subset of your audience understands. You're not using complex words that are someone for whom English is not a first language doesn't understand. What you're really doing is giving them a map that they can use to navigate it their own way. Second, it is memorable and will assist recall. So this was an example for a talk I had to do a couple of years ago on where I was talking about navigating application storage options on the Firebase platform. And I don't know if you see this, but it's a sea of data. And there's a ship that's navigating it. And the sails are all the different components of Firebase, right? So it's memorable. I don't know if people will remember all the details of the talk, but they all remember the ship. They're like, oh yeah, that ship talk, right? Third, and this is where the relatable thing comes, it creates clarity. Because it's like, if you remember nothing else, you're going to look at this and be like, okay, great. Firebase has a way for me to navigate data. And there are these X components that I can use for different reasons. And that's a win. So now let's talk about visual storytelling. So when I think about visual storytelling, which is really kind of what the gist of all the stuff we do in the creative space is, visual storytelling to me is an arc of 3 components. 101 is what we'll probably cover a lot of today, which is sketchnoting. And with sketchnoting, it's really quickly capturing ideas, quickly capturing concepts in a way where you effectively have a cheat sheet. You're like, hey, this is what was covered and this is the flow. And that's great for a starting point. But once you've conquered sketchnoting, there are 2 more levels to this. To skill up, a huge shout out to Denise Yu. She knows I'm going to say this because looking at her workshop, her site is one of the greatest inspirations for me. Really effectively changed my life in terms of thinking of how you would convey information. This is one of the images from her site. And it's kind of this notion of anthropomorphism. Yay, I said it right. And the idea here is, first you start by distilling information into a sketch note, and then add characters into your vocabulary, add characters into your story that will allow your audience to connect with the story you're telling. And here, the character is really about adding human traits to passive things. Technology is often very cold. How do you make it emotionally warm? Is add these character traits. And there are various workshops, including hers, which I hugely recommend, that you kind of check out to understand how you do this. So this is like skilling up level 1. But the holy grail for me is skilling up level 2, which is visual sketchnoting using metaphors, or visual storytelling using metaphors. And I want to give a huge shout out to Maggie Appleton. I just discovered her site recently. Illustrated.dev, definitely go check it out. But from the kind of arc of storytelling, it's like saying, first, I understand how to like just put my words down and know how to do the flow. Second, I'm able to connect with the audience by using characters. But third, I will really nail this if I can explain it to them through a framing device of something they already understand. So with visual metaphors, I like the 2 images at the bottom, which come from Maggie's site. It's really saying, figure out what thing A your audience knows best. And then figure out what thing B you're trying to explain to them. And then find that little window that will let you see parts of B through the lens of A and start there. Because once you've given them that kind of navigational cue, that like transference, they can then go and explore other stuff. And it's powerful. And this is where we really should be going to in tech. But we're really here to talk about sketchnoting for public speaking, right? Like sketchnoting and all of that is great. So we'll think about it, but why public speaking? Why are we thinking of this for public speaking? So I want to first motivate why every single one of us here should raise our hand and say, by the end of this year, I will do a talk if I've never done one before. And it's for 3 reasons. First, believe it or not, when you go and give a talk or write a post or do anything on a topic, it improves your own understanding of it. You will understand it better when you have to explain it to someone else. If you really want to be challenged, go explain it to 11-year-old because they don't take anything you say for granted, right? Second, it's a great way to build your brand. At this point in time, we really are looking at ways to upskill our careers. Building your brand by doing public speaking means by getting on the stage, you're letting people know, hey, I'm here, here's what I know, and it immediately gets people to find you and gravitate towards you to ask questions and create discussions and networks later. And my last thing is, if you're not doing it for yourself, and you should be, but if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for us. Because the more women get on stage, the more underrepresented minority speakers in tech get on stage, the more we change the ratio in what we expect at these big conferences. So you're probably thinking, but public speaking is scary. So I want to leave you the message. You're not alone. On the right side is a trend from 2014, which says the #1 fear of like pretty much every American is public speaking. It comes above snakes. I don't believe this. I mean, snakes is higher for me, but hey, it's true. My personal story is on the left. Even now, 20 years after the fact, that's my Fitbit reading when I get on a stage at ELACon. That giant spike is when I got on stage. Right now, I don't have a Fitbit, but my pulse is racing and I know it. I'm scared even today, but it's okay because when you do it, the minute you get there, you'll see your heart rate goes down and it's really amazing. So let's kind of talk about the speaker's dilemma. So maybe I've convinced you that you do need to do public speaking, right? You're like, yes, okay, fine, I'll do it. But what's stopping you? It's really 3 things. As a public speaker, you're going to ask, how do I do this? 1, How do I have clarity in my talk? How do I convey a complex idea to these various audiences that I'm going to deliver it to? Second, it's about recall. How do I connect my kind of, talk to the audience in a way that they will remember it later? They will remember the messages I want to send, and they will remember me, hopefully. But third is, this is actually my biggest dilemma even now, is pacing. Most conferences, most talks have constraints. You have 20 minutes, 30 minutes. How do you make sure you convey all your information in that time and still give that message? My tip to you is sketchnoting can help. And this is how I see it helping. First, sketchnoting can help you get better before you even write your talk. How? Because it can help you plan it in a way that meets those criteria. For what it's worth, the talk I'm giving you right now is a version of a talk I gave at a Build community event last year. It's been almost a year. This was that talk. And the way I went about it was literally, it was very meta. I basically first sketchnoted it. I took a sheet of paper and said, if I can't put everything I want to say onto one sheet of paper, then I'm saying too much, right? So let me first start by putting things on a sheet of paper. And I drew what I thought was my workflow, which is a little snaky thing going through it. Here are the big things I want to talk about. Everything else was blank. And then I started filling in little things around each of those big things. Oh, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about that. By the time I was done, I had clarified my big thinking on here are the big things I want to talk about. But look at it. It's so complicated. There's so much stuff. So then the next part, which is the part of sketchnoting that I love, is sketchnoting is not about a sheet. It's about really putting your ideas down on paper in a way that's visual. Construct your workflow by taking those and making index cards. That was my index cards. That is the carpet of my hotel room. I kid you not. Took each of those concepts and put them on an index card. And now I'm able to see immediately, oh, there are some things that have too much material, some things that have too little. This flow doesn't work. Let me throw this away and add something else. By the time I was done, I effectively had one card per slide that I could not map onto the actual deck. Much easier. And if you actually go look on Speaker Deck, you'll see that talk that maps very closely to these slides. So great. Sketchnoting, doodling, visual note-taking can help me plan my talk. But what about after the talk? Can it help then? You bet it can. What it does for you then is really the crux of career building, visibility, and then doing your next talk. Because when you share what you did, people resonate with it. So in my case, for example, like, I'll just throw out an idea and be like, hey, what do you think of this? Here's a little plan for something I want to work on. Or here are things I've done. Do you think this is relevant? And not only does it build visibility, but people get into conversations with you that can help you refine that idea, which is awesome. Second, you can derive new talk ideas. When you share the sketchnote, people come back and say, that was awesome, but I wish you'd gone into depth on that part. And you're like, okay, great, that's a talk for me right there. Third, this is your way to make sure that you put your takeaways from your talk the way you intended them, right? So let's say your audience is still sketchnoting your talk with their perspective. You still get to share your perspective, which is awesome. So those two are really the bookend to your talk, but is there any reason to like sketchnote other people's talks like during another talk? You bet. And the reason there is sketchnoting other people's talks will help you get better at doing sketchnoting in the first place. But it also does three things for you. It's really a learning process. First, remember the speaker's dilemma? The more you practice, the more you can solve it. And the best place to learn from is speakers who go before you. So if you are seeing another public speaker that you admire or hearing a talk and you're like, man, that was awesome, sketchnote it. Understand how they constructed the talk. Understand how they paced it. And then start looking at how those elements are reusable. More so if you're always sketchnoting in a particular technology space, over a period of time, you'll start collecting your own visual vocabulary of things that you'll become really fast at sketchnoting, which will make you a better sketchnoter for everything else. Again, you can then sketchnote other people's talks and share it for visibility and recall. We'll look at examples later. Most importantly, that lets you connect to those people who are actually influences on you and hopefully get to doing more things later. So let's talk a few examples. When you think about this, we're all social distancing right now. So maybe we don't get to go to as many conferences and connect with people in real life. Are there other ways we can do this? So I'm going to give you a few examples of things that have worked for me. First one, book reviews. It sounds strange, but it's true. Model 47 is a book that's written by Donna Sarkar and Jeremiah Marble at Microsoft. And it really was about their journey over a year, going and meeting a whole bunch of startups in Nigeria. And it was interesting to me because they wrote it as a startup toolkit. But when you look at my sketchnote, what you see is my perspective is different. I looked at it from a perspective of, oh my God, this is how we connect to entrepreneur communities. this is what I love about that community there and what I learned from it, right? And so it immediately got two things. I think of this as my visual Goodreads, right? Now, there's so much information in that book, so I might forget it. I just have a sketch note. Anytime I want to remember, what was that book about? I look it up. I have a whole stack of them. Second is, by sharing it, Donna came back and was like, this is amazing. And it also helped them because they were like, when we put this out there, we had a certain perspective and audience in mind, but you've given us another view. This is interesting, right? That means that I can now go and do something else with it. Visual Goodreads. Example number 2, conference live tweeting. Think of yourself as the visual reporter on scene. The fact that you are there makes you valuable. And there are actually a lot of virtual conferences going on right now, which is amazing, including this one. So the idea here is, this one, I picked this because Padma Shri is somebody I admire. I worked with her when I was in Microsoft. She was the CTO. But it kind of highlights two things. She was actually keynoting Grace Hopper, which, as you know, is a huge conference, which has a huge volume of tweets. And she's someone I know, so I actually sketch noted it and I highlighted a few things she said. But look at this. This is what's interesting to me, right? She chose to pick the sketch note and amplify it, and she literally took the things I had highlighted and tagged those people. I didn't tag them, she did. And later on, someone on her team actually reached out to me and said, can you send her a copy of that? She really loved it, right? But it immediately gave two things. One, in the middle of like 10,000 tweets on Grace Hopper, this surfaced up because the speaker loved it, and then other people saw it, and it actually became quite a popular thing. It led to other things. But second is, for the rest of my life, I have a memory of Grace Hopper I wouldn't have otherwise. You're a live reporter on the scene. Third, course recaps. We are all using this time of social distancing to upskill. If you're not, you should be, because there's a whole bunch of content online that people are giving away for free. Use it to create yourself visual study guides, right? And when you do that, again, sketchnoting is always about not just learning and distilling and getting practice, but sharing it back with the community who needs it. So in this case, when you think about visual study guide, this was an example of something I'd done for Coursera. I had a course in Google Cloud at the time, and I sketchnoted the first thing. And I might actually use this in a different context later. But when I looked at this, it's a visual study guide of, here's the big picture of this one course. It had 5 components. Here's course 1. Here are the things you learn. Turned out not only was the author of the course really happy with this because it gave him like a visual index, but there were other students who were like, hey, this is really cool because now I know where to look for what I need, right? So this is great. Last but not least, if nothing else, going back to the point of technology understanding, when you're practicing, try just sketchnoting talks where you are planning to learn something. This is an example from Microsoft Ignite the Build that happened in February. And this is about Power Platform, which is a platform for no-code, low-code that they built that I really wanted to learn about. I really want to learn how to build apps using this platform. And I've never had the time. So lo and behold, I'm there. And there was a community meetup, 70 minutes. They were going to build a whole app in 70 minutes. And I'm like, great, I'll just sit down. And I rapidly sketch noted the steps, not the details, just the steps. And now I had myself a cheat sheet. Literally took this over that weekend, took my cheat sheet, walked through it. I didn't have to go watch the 70-minute video, walked through the cheat sheet, replicated the steps, was able to learn. And in doing this, I also understood where there were things that were not mentioned that I could fill in, right? So it enhances your recall and understanding. So hopefully that helped. And at this point, you're like, hopefully you're at a point where you're like, yes, I do need to do public speaking. Yes, sketchnoting will help me. And so we're only left with, great, what are the things that I could learn? And this is where I'm at kind of at like the, you know what, I'm just going to be one of many people who gives you tips and tricks. So just take this with a grain of salt. But what I thought I would do is frame it in the context of things I've done and kind of relate it to my own experiences in my own journey, right? So first thing is when, what's the timing? Like the tips and tricks for getting started is when you think about timing, remember what I talked to you about the journey, right? Sketchnote before your talk, sketchnote after your talk, sketchnote during other people's talks, or even sketchnote during your own recorded talks to kind of constantly help you refine and improve the speed at which you understand flows and you can distill things down and reuse the vocabulary. Second and third is really important. What are you going to put on that sheet? And how are you going to use the right tools to make sure you do it quickly? So here's where I'm just going to run through a few little tips and tricks, and then we'll kind of wrap up. Tip number 1, let's talk about fonts. You've probably heard this. I know Corey had some of this in her sketchnoting keynote. But really, when you're talking about stories, you really want to give people places of visual interest. And so fonts can do 2 things for you. The type of font can give you different kinds of visual interest. So you can use, like cursive to kind of do a personal touch. Hey, this is my handwriting and this is how I'm going to say it. And then bubble letters to like do big announcements, whatever, right? So font types create visual interest at various parts of the page that draw the user's attention. But font sizes matter. They create places of focus, and then they create hierarchies. So in here, just by looking at the size, I can tell, hey, the most important things are the big things. If I only have 3 things I want to take away, just look at the 3 big things and I'll know them. But then if I want to understand, hey, there are 2 things on this page and how do they relate to each other, the smaller font size is probably a child of the bigger one. So use fonts to create visual interest and hierarchies. Navigation. This is the same example I gave you. Like, this was my first version of the talk a year ago. I use navigation as a way to kind of like create paths and signposts so that I'm creating a guide for the user to go through my story within the constraints of that page. Signs would be like arrow marks. They could be like, look here, that kind of thing, right? But the most important thing is when I sketchnote, I leave a lot of free space between those that I can fill in. That lets me expand or correct my understanding later. Third, colors. You've seen colors throughout, but colors actually, I'll use the same machine learning example, give you 2 different things that are super important. You'll never be able to do color. Some people are really good and they can do it live. I tend to come back, do a black and white sketch note and then color it in. But colors help you suddenly take this busy page and create separation. Bring focus to different areas, right? So now you can look at this and immediately be like, oh, there were 4 big concepts, right? Orange, pink, green, and purple. And then you're able to now create colors. I mean, you can use color to highlight similarity in the themes. Oh, within this, all the different things belonging to that color are somehow related. So use colors intelligently to kind of clean up after your sketch note, but also add visual interest. Icons and quotes, you've seen a lot of this, but these are actually my 2 favorite tools. Keep a cheat sheet where you've got a whole bunch of symbols that invoke familiar concepts that'll give you brevity and clarity. If you have only this much space on your sketch note, it's easier to put an icon than to write a lot of text. And icons convey, like wine glass with attitude, conveys fun, whimsy, and interest, but still says, that's what I'm trying to represent. But quotes to me are the lifeblood of sketch notes. Because when you listen to someone, one thing they say is going to like really resonate, immediately capture it, make it big, because you want to give people takeaways. Quotes are the signature things that resonated with you. And chances are they resonated with you, they will resonate with others. Last but not least, when everything is said and done, what really makes your sketchnote unique? Why aren't we getting sketchnoting AIs to replace everything? Why do we need to be doing this? It's because it reflects your personality. You are unique. Your perspective on this is unique. What you're doing is bringing authenticity to the representation, right? What did you see? What did you hear that makes an impact? So if you looked at this, I kind of highlighted one thing. In this entire talk that was done during a startup tour event, the thing that really resonated with me was this one thing that the speaker said, which was, how can we keep our humanity when tech is like doing so much to help kind of erode it, right? And I was like, yes, that is my anchor. This is what really, really got to me. And I understand that. And so like that kind of thing is probably something I would have taken seen as important, others may not have. So with that, like that kind of covers what I wanted to say, right? It's like at the end of the day, there's no way we can like do everything in 30 minutes, but hopefully what I really did is kind of give you an idea of why sketchnoting can help you with public speaking and ways that you can improve. But at the end of the day, it's all about practice, practice, practice. So I'm going to leave you with a few kind of like calls to action, right? Draw every day. Carry a sketchnoting pad or a doodle pen or whatever. Draw every day, visualize everything. I just put a bunch of examples over the past couple of years that I've been doing. On the top right is my son sitting on a Metro North train staring out the window that I sketched. On the left side was a picture taken of the Statue of Liberty, which had a quote, which at that time of my life, I really felt strongly about. In the middle, the 1, 2, 3, 4 was really a challenge someone had put together. One of our MVPs, right, was like, hey, can you show me different ways to represent 10 numbers? And I was like, great, let's do it. You can move over to digital tools. So the blue thing is really done on Procreate and a way to kind of layer stuff around. You can just do art for the sake of art. So I've started like embracing my culture a little bit more and trying to kind of like replicate things that were very traditional Indian with intricate design. You can see something and use it somewhere else. That's Fearless Girl standing in front of the White House because it's 2020, right? And the last one is an icon for Flutter. there are ways in which you can use new techniques, join a sketch group, go digital, keep evolving your art, practice, practice, practice. So with that, I'm going to leave you with this summary. Visual storytelling. Why are we talking about it? It drives clarity and recall. Before your talk, use your skill to plan content and workflow. After the talk, share to drive visibility and recall. And during the talk, practice, 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 and learn structure, pacing, and vocabulary. This was my first sketch note for this talk. And when I was done, I colored it, and you probably will think this is a little better. It's not perfect because my cards were different, but this is where I landed up. Thank you so much. Last couple of things. There are a ton of free resources on the web that will help you convert this sketch note into slides without having to draw everything if you choose. My slides are available at that link that you see. And remember that the unifying element to your visual storytelling is always you. And final shout out, I'm like so thrilled because I'm actually going to be doing 3 sketchnoting talks next week at Microsoft Build. If you're interested, go to that link, register, it's free, and come join me. And like, we're going to try to do sketching of some doc stuff online. So thank you so much for your time. And I really, really appreciate it.